All right, so today we're going to talk about the founding of the great state of Nevada. And for that, right, you can go back, and current data suggests that you can go back as many as 26,000 years ago in terms of when humans first arrived in what is now North America. They keep pushing that date back. It used to be around 15,000 years ago. Now they think, based on current evidence and data, maybe as far back as 26,000 years ago. Right, so you start to get human habitation in North America, and that ends up including, right, what is now the American Southwest, which includes what is now the great state of Nevada. Make sure that for this module, Module 2B, that you read chapters 1 and 2 from the Michael Bowers book. I have those posted within Module 2B as PDF files. That provides a more detailed portrait of this material. All right. These slides, the intro video, that's kind of a broad overview. For the finer details, check out those 2 chapters. They're relatively painless. All right, let's go. We might best capture the what I'll call the early days of what becomes the state of Nevada by going back again about 12,000 years ago. This is when the first humans, as near as we can tell, arrived in what is now the American Southwest. They arrived on the northern tip of North America across a land bridge, what is now, of course, the Bering Strait, that gap between Alaska and Russia, I believe. Now we know, right, that originally humans originated, near as we can tell, on the African continent, and ever since then, a diaspora out of that continent, slowly peopling the rest of the world. As part of this diaspora, we get humans arriving in what is now the Southwest, northern North America, originally about 12,000 years ago. Right, so we know that indeed that becomes significant here because these become known as Native Americans. They're the first people to occupy the land that is now defined as Nevada. The first Europeans arrive, or start to at least cross the land that is now Nevada, in about 1776, so much later, right? Much later. Spanish settlers seeking what is now California, traveling from Santa Fe, New Mexico. So really just crossing over the land. They saw it, by and large, as barren and unproductive and not a likely place to stop. The land that is now Nevada becomes the possession of Mexico in 1822, had previously been under the control of Spain, right, one of the global superpowers. We talked about that, right? North America was being colonized by a number of European superpowers, including the French, the British, the Spanish. So the Spanish have a good chunk of what is now the American Southwest. But Mexico, as a colony of Spain, rises up, much like the United States rose up against Britain, and they gained their independence from Spain in 1821. And so, as a matter of law, this land becomes part of Mexico circa 1822. And at around this time, early 19th century, British and American explorers are going west. We talked about that, right? The colonies start out on the eastern seaboard of North America. Gradually, the American empire starts to expand west. Settlers start to cross the Appalachian Mountains. Jefferson makes the Louisiana Purchase. We continue to go west, young man, in order to grow the country geographically and numerically as well. And so you start to get both British and American explorers trying to figure out what's out west. They cross ultimately the Rocky Mountains. That was very difficult for them, as you might imagine. They cross the land that is now Nevada, and they do see potential, right? But they do see the potential of potentially mining these mineral deposits as a source of value in land that is otherwise seen agriculturally as largely barren and unproductive. Potentially productive in terms of its mineral deposits. 3 key events ultimately trigger a cascading series of events that leads to the creation of the state of Nevada. The first of these, the Mexican-American War of 1848. As the U.S. is expanding westward, we ultimately come to believe that it is our manifest destiny, a destiny charted for us by God, to overspread the North American continent, or from the Atlantic Ocean in the east to the Pacific Ocean in the west. The problem, however, with this vision is that Mexico is in the way. They occupy all of that territory bordering the Pacific Ocean, and we declare war on Mexico. We tried to purchase this land. Mexico refused. Mexico was relatively weak, right? Had only become its own independent nation circa 1821. And so we see the possibilities here, right? If you're not going to sell it to us, we'll go to war. Henry David Thoreau, among others, decried this war as a naked land grab, certainly seen by Mexicans as the U.S. invasion. The U.S., a growing nation, an increasingly powerful nation, a very ambitious nation. The U.S. easily wins the Mexican-American War. As a result, they seize possession of a vast chunk of territory that is now called the American Southwest, including, among other states, California, Arizona, Nevada, and New Mexico. Again, seen as part of our manifest destiny. We now have access to the Pacific Ocean. We can now overspread the North American continent east to west. This obviously becomes important for the possibility of the birth of the state of Nevada. That land that we now call Nevada is now in the possession of the United States as a result of the Mexican-American War. A key event in the creation of the state of Nevada happens when a significant number of Mormons flee, I think it's Illinois in the Midwest. They flee religious persecution. They head west, and they end up in what later becomes Salt Lake City, in what shortly becomes the Utah Territory. And they are, again, concentrated in the Salt Lake City part of that territory, which would be on the kind of the eastern end of that geography. And increasingly, there's also significant, so you get significant human settlement, right, mostly Mormon, in the eastern part of the what becomes the Utah Territory. And then in the western edge of that territory, you get we'll see in a moment, a growing number of non-Mormons related to, in many ways, the California Gold Rush of 1849. So you end up with sort of a bipolar, if you will, distribution of humans in this very large, what becomes by 1850 Utah Territory. On the eastern end of that territory, you have a whole lot of Mormons. And on the western edge of that territory, you got a whole lot of non-Mormons. All right. So that creates kind of this religious and geographic divide, a bipolarity, if you will, that ultimately sets the stage for that very large Utah Territory being divided up into at least two territories. The eastern part of it becomes the Utah Territory, a much smaller territory then, and carved out of that, you get the Nevada Territory. And obviously, eventually, that Nevada Territory becomes the state of Nevada, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. Another event that ultimately helps lead to the creation of the state of Nevada is the Gold Rush of 1849, where gold is discovered in California. It ultimately attracts roughly 300,000 people from back east in the Midwest looking to make their fortune. This is where you get the go west, young man sort of adage about American history. And they end up extracting, I think, roughly $2 billion in value over some number of years. So this generates enormous amounts of wealth. Some of this wealth goes to help build the great city of San Francisco. And ultimately, interestingly enough, down the road a ways, it is investors California, and including San Francisco, that helped to build the city of Las Vegas early to mid 20th century. And indeed, investing in general in businesses in the state of Nevada. So in that kind of odd way, around the bushes a bit, the gold rush does help to create capital in Northern California that ultimately some of that gets invested in the state of Nevada much later. But the more immediate impact of the gold rush is to generate huge numbers of people moving west, and many of them passing through what is now Southern Nevada, what is now Las Vegas. If you ever go out to the it's called the Springs Preserve, I believe. That was, I think, along the not the Santa Fe Trail, the old Spanish Trail. I believe that's also some of that trail can also be found in and around Red Rock, if you ever go out there at all. Yeah, and so this becomes, sort of a place to resupply. Las Vegas becomes a place to resupply along the old Spanish Trail as these individuals look to make their push over the mountains and into California to pursue their fame and fortune via the gold rush. So that creates, the possibility of significant human habitation in what later becomes Southern Nevada, because it creates economic reasons, economic productivity. It creates economically productive activity in what becomes Southern Nevada, resupplying these people headed out west. We're now up to the exact midpoint of the 19th century. The year is 1850. And in 1850, Congress passes legislation regarding slavery, right? This is much of what's been happening in Congress for the last few decades. They're trying to come to grips with the issue of slavery. One of their many compromises is that handed down in 1850. And in this 1850 compromise, Congress essentially says we're going to essentially negate the Missouri Compromise of 1820. That was more sort of a pro-abolitionist compromise. This is more of a 50-50 compromise. And what Congress declares is, as we create new states out of these Western territories, these states can choose to be either slave or free. It is up to them. And we'll see that in terms of how political forces play out in the next several years, the very fact that Nevada is destined to be a free state is going to come out on the abolitionist side. This favors their admission into the Union. It does not favor Utah's admission into the Union, as we'll see. We get what many historians have called a period of anarchy and confusion, circa 1857 to 1861. In this period of anarchy and confusion in the Utah Territory, really takes place as a result of the discovery of the Comstock lode, the discovery of a very rich deposit of silver in what is now Nevada. At the time was the southern half of the Utah Territory. This results in sort of a silver rush of sorts. It creates rapid economic growth in that part of the territory where there is that silver lode, but as a result as well, in this pell-mell pursuit of wealth, a breakdown of law and order, right? The rise of vigilante justice. There's so much wealth being generated. The forces of government are far to the north, as we've discussed, right? Far to the north in Salt Lake City. And the distance back then was great, right? They didn't have highways back then. They didn't have automobiles. They did not have airplanes. So if you were several hundred miles away, that was very far indeed, over pitted dirt roads at best that could get muddy during much of the year, snowed in during the winter, horse and carriage. You can imagine the geographical distance between Salt Lake City in the north, the Comstock lode in the southern half of the Utah Territory, makes the possibility of law and order deeply problematic in the context of the discovery of silver, right? This is captured in that HBO series of many years ago called Deadwood. All right, so this creates then a political crisis, a breakdown of law and order in the southern half of the Utah Territory. The next significant event, Congress ultimately decides to divide the Utah Territory into two sections. The northern half becomes the Utah Territory, the southern half becomes the Nevada Territory. What's also going on at around this same time? The southern states secede from the Union over the issue of slavery. They see where things are headed. They don't like where things are headed. Too many of these new western states are proving to be abolitionist. The Union seeks to pull those southern states back into the Union. Civil War results, right? The Civil War. And with the Civil War, the Republicans, of course, come to dominate Congress. The Southern Democrats leave. They create their own confederacy. So the Union, the Congress, is dominated by the Republican Party, created in 1854, right? As basically as an abolitionist party, certainly an anti-slavery party. Lincoln wins the White House on behalf of the Republicans in 1860. So national political forces are all on the side of the Republican Party, on the anti-slavery side of that question. And of course, this becomes very significant, right? Because again, what's Nevada looking to become? A free state. Utah ultimately hedges. They hedge on the issue of slavery. I think it was Brigham Young was the governor of the Utah Territory. He does not rule out slavery as a possibility. He sees biblical endorsements for that institution, and in addition, of course, he's an advocate of polygamy. That also does not sit well with the U.S. Congress or the White House. So the Nevada Territory, once it's created, has huge political advantages over the Utah Territory. Let's be clear then, as we head towards statehood in 1864, again, the national political forces are arrayed on the side of Nevada becoming a state, right? The Republican Party is in control of national politics. They're looking to make sure that Lincoln gets reelected in 1864. They're looking ahead to the end of the Civil War and passage of the 13th Amendment that bans slavery. And they know that if they can add Nevada to the Union prior to that election, that'll help Lincoln get reelected. It'll help with the subsequent passage of the 13th Amendment to the Constitution. So things are looking good for Nevada in terms of attaining statehood circa 1864. Two problems, however, two flies in the ointment. One, the initial proposal in terms of a state constitution that would make Nevada a state and not just a territory. One, silver mines will be taxed as property, just like homes and other businesses. Second, the new state constitution will come with kind of a package deal here, a specific set of office holders. On both of these issues, I believe the voters of Nevada say that's bullshit. Silver mines should not be taxed as property. Mining is a dodgy proposition at best. Most silver mines back then, 9 out of 10, were unproductive, unprofitable. If you taxed all 10 of those mines as property, this would arguably make mining a non-viable economic proposition. So that was seen as problematic. Second, right, it was also seen as problematic that you would have a popular vote on a new state constitution that would include a specific set of office holders for the governorship, for the Secretary of State, for the Assembly, for the State Senate, right? That's ridiculous. It should not be a package deal. You should pass a new constitution. Once implemented, you elect a specific set of office holders in a separate election, of course, right? That's the way it was done with the U.S. Constitution. So this initial effort with these two problems falls short of popular approval. You're going to need popular approval at the state level before you can send it on to Congress for approval. So we recall the convention. These two problems are fixed, if you will, although we'll talk about that first one a little bit more later on. Mines, it is decided, will be taxed at about 5% of net profit. So if they're profitable, they will be taxed. If they're not profitable, they will not be taxed. This is seen as a better form of public policy. We still have that in place today. That's been debated hotly in recent legislative sessions up in Carson City. Second, we decide that indeed we'll initially pass a new state constitution, and then once implemented, we will hold elections for who will hold the governorship, who will hold these other elected offices statewide. In addition, to sort of sweeten the deal, Nevada concedes to the federal government's demand that Nevada hand over nearly all of their land to the feds, right? All land not privately owned, handed over to the feds. And we're the only state that kind of end up with that sort of a deal. I think even today, over 80% of Nevada's land belongs to the federal government. This does win popular approval in Nevada. It's telegraphed quickly to the District of Columbia, to the U.S. Congress. Congress wants it as soon as possible. Up to that point, it was the most expensive telegram ever. I think it cost over $2,000. Back then, that was a huge amount of money because Congress wanted it done quickly. We'll steal that line from Shakespeare. Were it done, 'twere well it were done quickly. It is done quickly, just in time for the November elections in 1864, right? That's what Congress wants. They want Nevada as part of the Union because that will strengthen the Republican Party. It will enhance Lincoln's chances of winning re-election. It will enhance the possibility of passage of the 13th Amendment. So boom, as soon as Congress gets it, they vote to approve it. 1864, statehood for the great state of Nevada. And again, right, Utah ends up lagging because they're stuck on the issues of slavery and polygamy. This does not play well in Washington, D.C. Utah doesn't win statehood until much later. I think it was the late 1890s. So there's mud in your eye, Utah. Nevada's first across the finish line here.